Croeso, Difda, Bernachtin, Gia Hwitch, Fulcher, Daymat. Welcome to the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. I am your humble host, Sian Esther Powell, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey through all the myths and legends of the 6 Celtic nations. That's Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, Isle of Man, Scotland and Ireland. Welcome. Hello everyone. First off, such a big apologies for not getting this out yesterday on the 31st of August. I am gutted because I've been so proud at uploading once a month and getting things out in a timely manner, so I hope that it won't affect things too much for it to be out today, and the next episode will definitely be out on the 31st of August. The reason is last Friday I had ridiculously debilitating pain that knocked me out for 3 days straight. I'm not being like dramatic. I was barely functional. I was bedridden. I was basically a upper class Victorian housewife. I'm spending a lot of time recently with this post-viral fatigue, acting like a upper-class Victorian housewife. And I've got to say, the novelty has well and truly worn off. I must admit. Let's get back to normalcy now. Thank you very much. Do you know what? I absolutely take that back. I don't want normalcy. I want to be whisked away to the land of fairy. That's what I want. Thank you very much. So the past sort of couple weeks or so, I've been flicking through my Manx Fairy Tales by Sophia Morrison. I've got a gorgeous hardback copy of that. I can't remember where did I get that from? Where did I get this from? Anyway, it was an absolute steal. If I got it or did someone gift it to me, I can't remember. My brain doesn't work. And it's gorgeous and wonderful. And I was been flitting through it looking for my next topic on Manx folklore, because anyone who has been listening to me for a while will know that this podcast focuses on one of the 6 Celtic nations. Sometimes I draw comparisons with the other Celtic nations, but we focus on one and then do that. And of course we are back to the Isle of Man. Sorry, I had ginormous headphones on just then, and I think I was probably speaking way too loud, so they were distracting me, so I had to take them off. Anyway, because I've been feeling a bit rotten, feel sorry for me, don't be mean to me. No, I'm only joking. I wanted something really light, really light and fluffy today. No death portents, no lofty academic thinking today, my friends. And you know that we cover a wide range of things on this podcast. Sometimes we're a bit chattier than usual. Sometimes we're a bit more academic than usual. Sometimes we're talking about epic myths. Sometimes we're talking about folklore. Did I just do a little burp then? That was so rude. I'm so sorry. That was disgusting. That was completely unbidden. That just come out of my body. I'm very sorry. My dad gave me a fizzy drink. Blame my dad. Don't be mean to me. My friends are finding it hilarious lately because I have to be honest with my health stuff sometimes, and I can't do as much as I was able to prior to being a bit poorly. So I'm constantly saying things like, right, I'm going to say this, but don't be mean to me. So don't be mean to me, guys. Completely lost my train of thought, but essentially I want to do something fun, something funny, silly, that's not going to require lots of crazy amounts of thoughts from me at the moment. I was very lucky enough to give a talk on unicorns recently to an American organisation, and I'm very lucky to be giving a talk I definitely had to edit out that but it was more of a goblin gurgle actually, which is probably quite relevant to this podcast. Anyway, I'm very lucky enough to be giving a talk to Grimsby Hollow Meadery in Michigan. So exciting. I'm not being flown over to Michigan, don't worry. But my face is going to be beamed up on the screen somewhere, which is very, very exciting to me. So all of my my academic my big thinking has to go towards that. So you're getting silly Sian this episode. I'm very sorry, but I don't think you're going to be disappointed because it's going to be a fun one, okay? It's going to be a really fun one, I believe. But before we get into it really, anyone that's from the Isle of Man, could you let me know? I really want to know if I actually have any listeners from the Isle of Man. I so want to get over there one day and just visit everything. And I've been told that the National Museum there is like one of the best, that the museum is awesome, and I just need to visit. I need to visit it and go. So thank you very much. Also, on my talk at Grimsby Hollow Meadery, you can go to that. That's a physical thing. That's not an online talk. If you are in and around the Michigan area at all, Google this place. And if you live near it and you want to go, you've got a free afternoon, go check it out. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be so much fun. It's this Saturday. It's Saturday the 5th. Is it the 5th? I think so. Saturday the 5th at 4 p.m. your time, which is going to be 9 p.m. my time. But anyway, if you live anywhere near it, go and check it out. I'm doing a Celtic mythology, where to begin. So I'm going to do a big overview on Celtic mythology, trying my very best because it's a very messy subject. And then I'm going to kind of go through each of the Celtic nations, do a bit of storytelling, bit of academic discussion, a bit of history connecting the Celtic regions. That sounds like fun to you. I mean, everyone's probably going to be drinking mead, which I hope they are, and enjoying it and getting progressively more and more merry. That's how I hope it's going to go. If that sounds like fun to you, go and check it out. Thank you very much. So without further ado, my lovely, lovely listeners, my lovely, lovely friends, what are we covering this episode? I just did the creepiest Muttley laugh that I literally had to edit out. I was like, people are not going to want that laugh in their ears. Anyway, we're going to be talking about GEF, the talking mongoose. GEF to you, baby. The talking mongoose. We've got a bit of everything in this one, my friends. We've got a haunting. We've got wild animals. We've got cases for slander. We've got ventriloquism. It's a little bit of a fun one. So whom or what is GEF, the talking mongoose? So GEF, otherwise known as the talking mongoose or the Dalby spook, or GEF the talking mongoose, which is what I'm going to be exclusively saying it as, is a very strange paranormal occurrence that happened on the Isle of Man in the early 1930s. So the Irving family, which consisted of father Jim Irving, mother Margaret Irving, and I had to consult my lovely friend Will for the pronunciation of the daughter because it's a lovely Manx name, and I wanted to make sure that I got it right. So I've got him on recording being very lovely. Let's see if this picks up the voice clip he sent me.
Cashin's Gap, where the haunting took place. So Cashin is a Manx family name, so the area would have been historically owned or settled by people with the surname Cashin, but obviously the Irving family would have moved there, and Irving is still a name found by quite a few Manx people in their surname at the moment too. So the name Vory, as we say nowadays, I think it comes from like a Manx version of Mary, which would have been Mura, and it would have been said Vura back in the day, but with the way language evolves and mutates, and now we have the name quite prevalent on the island. It's a very popular name for Manx girls, so it's Vory. We say it Vory now.
So thank you very much to my lovely Manx friend there, Will, for the proper pronunciation, some of the details. He also said that one of his friend's grandfather said that Vory was a very strange girl, so that might factor into whether you sort of believe what I'm about to tell you or not. So the Irving family, consisting of father Jim, mother Margaret and daughter Vory, lived in a farmhouse at Cashin's Gap on the Isle of Man. Now, you have to understand that in the 1930s, living in a rural area, like anywhere on the Isle of Man or anywhere in the UK, anywhere in Europe, whatever, anywhere in the world actually, like 1930s rural areas, and especially like on a farmstead, right? They're still rural and isolated today a lot of the time. In the 1930s, about the internet and all that sort of stuff, you're going to be kind of isolated, I imagine. I could be totally wrong, but I imagine that you're going to be quite isolated. And it was in September 1931 that the completely unbelievable happened. I won't cast aspersions too soon, but the family had heard scratchings and strange noises and sort of thuds and animal paw prints and stuff like that coming from the walls of their house. Now, as I mentioned, they lived on a farm. It was an old stone farmhouse. And actually, I've read a little bit about it, obviously, I've read a little bit about it. I'm covering it on the podcast. Anyway, they had wood panelling in front of of like the old stone walls, which created this sort of airspace between the two sets of walls. So you could create a noise and that noise would travel around the house. So I don't know. All I'm saying, that's just how the house was set up. I don't know. It could have been Jeff the Talking Mongoose, and you would have heard a lot of his kind of scrufflings and voice around the house. But in the early 1930s, they said that they had been visited by a talking mongoose named Jeff. So we get our physical descriptions of Jeff from Vorry. So he was described as being quite small, yellowish fur, and that is from Vorry herself describing his physical attributes. But mostly you hear of Jeff in voice form, to be honest. He seems to kind of exist, his voice speaking to the family members and supposedly speaking to a couple of visitors and locals as well, in a very kind of high-pitched voice. Jeff mentioned... I just assumed he had a high-pitched voice. I'm sure that I've read that somewhere, but whatever. How would you... Come on, get in contact with me, email me. How would you assume a mongoose would sound? If you're on Instagram, if you're on Messenger, send me a voice clip of your best mongoose impression. So Jeff the Talking Mongoose said that he was from New Delhi and he was born in 1852. So been there for a little while in those walls, because I don't think mongoose I don't think they live very long. So yeah, he's probably been lurking around in those walls for a little while at least. And actually, Jeff doesn't sound like an awful roommate or housemate to have. He supposedly helped guard their home. He would tell the Irving family when visitors were approaching. Sometimes he would go into the village with them and kind of walk around and like gossip about the neighbours and stuff like that. So actually, you know, a pretty good guard mongoose, to be honest with you. He pulled his weight. The family said that if they left the stove on, that Jeff would go down and turn the stove off. So he was really looking after their well-being here, and they would leave out various bits of food for him to eat. There's a respectable two-way relationship between this poltergeist mongoose and the family, and the Irving family. But of course, as helpful as your mongoose is, it's still probably disconcerting having a discombobulated, you know, mongoose voice floating around the entirety of your, you know, rural isolated farmhouse. So of course this became like a gigantic news story. In fact, I brought it up to my parents, the subject that I was covering for this episode, and my dad had heard about it, my mum had heard about it. My dad remembers his grandmother telling him about it in like the 1960s, you know, the late 60s, talking about it as if it was like fact. So, you know, it's a pretty big pop culture phenomenon in British kind of news history. So the daughter Vorry was 13 years old when this all started coming out. And Jeff would say like some really strangely ominous but profound things like, I'm a freak, I have feet, and all of this other stuff, but if you saw me, you'd be petrified, you'd be mummified, you'd be so scared of me. So he was kind of having a real existential crisis as a mongoose, bless him, which reminds me of one of my absolute favourite books, I'll tell you that now. Olaf Stapledon wrote was a British science fiction writer. Was he a philosopher as well? He might have been. Anyway, and he wrote a really great book called Sirius, which is set in the North Wales. It's set in North Wales on a farmhouse, and it's about a super intelligent dog called Sirius. And yes, it's some of the favourite things that I love about that book actually is that Sirius, the character, is having such a strong identity crisis because, you know, he's a dog, but he has super intelligence. Well, he has human intelligence and actually is much more intelligent than most humans. So he does kind of he's very highly intellectual. So he's feeling very outside of other dogs, but he also has like the natural urges and stuff to kind of like mate with female dogs and that kind of thing because he is a dog, right? You know, he's got that ingrained into him instinctively, but he has that kind of higher consciousness. So he's able to have like these lofty, interesting discussions with the family, but he also is a dog, so he can't ever be on their level. So he's having a truly kind of a big identity crisis throughout the book. And I remember It's got this absolutely gorgeous passage about Sirius kind of imagining the universe out there and all of the little spirits and all of the different planets and all that kind of things. And it's wonderful. And I haven't read it for many, 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 many years, but I always think very, very, very fondly about that book. And for some reason, this whole Jeff the Mongoose thing really kind of made me think about Sirius by Olaf Stapledon. So I kind of want you to imagine, really, if Jeff the Mongoose is real, it kind of has to be a bit of an identity crisis, right? To be a talking mongoose, you I don't suppose there's very many talking mongoose walking around, walking around. So it'd be very difficult to find someone on your level, wouldn't it? You'd have all sorts of existential and identity crises. So I feel for Jeff wanting to befriend the Irving family, especially with a 13-year-old Vori who has been described by others who knew her as a very strange girl. So it would make sense if I was a discombobulated floating voice of a mongoose with a spectral, ghostly, accompaniment. I would probably also want to befriend strange outcast teenagers as well, not in a creepy way, because he's a mongoose. He can't do anything creepy, can he? But yeah, I'd probably want to go for the strange goth teenagers as well. I'm like, maybe they wouldn't judge me. But that's a complete hypothetical, because I will never be a discombobulated floating voice of a talking mongoose with a ghostly phantom apparition accompanying it, unfortunately for me. So this was so bizarre, so unlike any other kind of poltergeist stories or hauntings of the time, and still to this day it's completely unique in how kind of totally individual this haunting experience was, that it captured the attention of the British press and maybe the international press as well. It's not every day that a talking mongoose starts haunting a rural secluded family, right? The British press had an absolute heyday with this, and actually it caught the interest of lots of paranormal investigators, one of the most famous of whom was Harry Price. Now, Harry Price was an incredibly interesting man, so I definitely suggest you kind of look him up and read a bit more about him. But essentially, he was involved with some potential hoaxes himself. He was very interested in lots of strange, unexplainable phenomena, but also ghosts, the paranormal, magic, conjuring, and also archaeology. So he claimed to have been inordinately kind of lucky and blessed to find lots of clean archaeology. So these like shining ingots that actually another archaeologist was like, this is fake. These are fake. And he'd claimed like lots of other things that had been debunked. So interestingly enough, he then became a kind of serial debunker, if you will, of clairvoyants and mediums who he claimed to be fraudulent. So he took a great interest in the GEF case and went over to the Isle of Man to investigate it. And he, along with his friend Richard Lambert, who is a British broadcaster, biographer, historian, ended up writing the book The Haunting of Cashin's Gap that they released in 1936. It's quite interesting because, as I said, he was a bit of a serial debunker, but actually the book, although doesn't claim that the story is real, it doesn't say it's factual or anything like that, they kind of take a bit of a step back and keep a bit of an open mind about everything that they are reporting on, which is probably the best way to report on something like this, right? You can't just go into it like rubbish, poo, silly. You've kind of got to go in and report exactly what people have said, exactly what people have felt, and I guess leave it up to everyone else, leave it up to readers, leave it up to listeners for what you believe. I don't think I've actually been anywhere near as objective or, good as those blokes, because I started the episode laughing, so sorry. However, saying that, the two men actually did do a lot of really interesting work to kind of potentially debunk it. So they sent the alleged hair of Jeff to a naturalist who claimed that it was, very likely the hair of a dog. And they also collected an imprint of an alleged paw print of Jeff's and sent that off to another naturalist who again said most likely a dog. And the Irving family did have a farm dog, Mona, and it was actually Price's observation about the double walls, so that's where I got that from, that it was an old stone cottage and that there was this wood panelling in front of the old original stone walls that created this really interesting kind of phenomena of sound travelling around the house. So yeah, very interesting chap, and definitely look up Harry Price if you're interested in learning a little bit more about kind of the early 1900s, like paranormal research and stuff in Britain. And interestingly enough, I mentioned lawsuits at the beginning. Well, Richard Lambert was on the board of trustees for the British Film Institute, and he actually took someone to court, Sir Cecil Leviter. He took this chap to court for slander because Levita had said that obviously Lambert was, basically bonkers for believing something as ridiculous as Jeff the Talking Mongoose. And he had specifically said that he was unfit to be on the board for the British Film Institute, which I'm assuming is a pretty kind of prestigious role to be in. Lambert used the kind of evidence and the argument that this sort of slander, this viewpoint would harm his reputation in the public and potentially be negative against his career, especially as being on the board of the British Film Institute. And he won. He received, well over £7,000 in the 1930s, which, was a pretty significant amount of money. Oh my God, I've just Googled an inflation calculator from the Bank of England.co.uk, so I don't know how accurate this is or whatever, but I've typed in what goods and services costing £7,600 in 1937 costs in June 2023. I don't know why it's stuck in June. We are now in August, but anyway. And apparently it's like 426,000 quid. So just, not that far off £500,000, which is absolutely insane. So that was a huge amount of money at the time. I don't know if it actually was that amount, but yeah, £7,600 in damages was a really large amount of money to receive in a case of slander at the time, which I just thought was pretty interesting. So I thought I'd include that and also show you the kind of far-reaching consequences of this story and how big in the kind of pop culture understanding and awareness of this story it trailed off that sentence there. I didn't have a full stop for that sentence. I'm very sorry. But yeah, basically a lot of people knew about it. A lot of people knew about Jeff. So the Irving family had a pretty nice relationship with Jeff. They'd leave him like biscuits, bananas, chocolates, sweeties, stuff like that. And as I said, he'd keep them safe. He'd also look after the mice and rats that ended up in their farmhouse. Pretty likely thing to happen, to be honest. Rats and mice do get in when you're in a secluded area. Like, I don't know how secluded it was. Maybe it was like a bustling cosmopolitan area. I'm really sorry to any Manx people if I'm getting it wrong, but I'm assuming it's like a kind of a fairly rural farm, right? I think you can go today, but it's the building no longer exists. Looks like it's in a field or something. I looked up a Culture Vannin video. Shout out to Culture Vannin. Oh my God, I love that organisation. YouTube Culture Vannin, please, guys. Look up Culture Vannin on YouTube. It's a Manx organisation, on the Isle of Man, and they post so many interesting videos on like Manx culture, history, like really cool stuff. So yeah, definitely check out Culture Vannin. But they had a video uploaded visiting the site of Jeff the Talking Mongoose, and it looked like it was just like in a field, so pretty rural. So I'm imagining it was even more so rural in 1931. So Jeff would look after mice and rats, and also, but this is the cute thing, didn't like to kill them. He wanted to scare them away, but didn't want to kill them or hurt them. And actually woke up people when they overslept. So pretty good alarm in a ghost mongoose. I like that. Points for originality. I am notoriously not a morning person. I am very much a night owl. I'm still recording this at 12:30 in the evening. I'm very much a night owl. But you know what would get me up in the morning? A talking mongoose. The ghost of a talking mongoose. No less. especially the ghost of a talking mongoose from New Delhi, born in 1852, that would definitely have me leaping out of bed in the mornings, I must admit. So interestingly enough, I had no idea that there's about to be a film made of this. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, anyone that's listened to my podcast for a while will know that I cover one of the 6 Celtic nations, and I just happened to be back to Isle of Man, and because of the way my health has been lately, I wanted something that I could have a bit of fun with, that was a bit breezy, not breezy, but do you know what I mean, a bit of fun fluff, as funny and fluffy as Poltergeist Hauntings can be, right? So I chose to talk about GEF the Talking Mongoose. It's something I've wanted to talk about for a while, and I've talked about sort of urban legends and potential hoaxes before in my Cornish Urban Legends podcast episode. So it's certainly something that I'm interested in covering. You know, I'll be covering medieval literature, I'll be covering folk tales, I'll be covering more recent urban legends. You know, all of these things I think can come under the umbrella of legend and of folklore, very much so. You know, neighbourhood gossip can come under the umbrella of folklore. So yeah, this podcast is always going to be covering a variety of very different things. Where was I? Anyway, there's a film featuring Simon Pegg that's about to come out, and I just googled GEF the Talking Mongoose, mostly because I wanted to find out how to pronounce Vory correctly. And I found that lovely. Then I went down a rabbit hole of watching Culture Vannin videos again. So I've done that many times before. But then I saw a trailer for a new film coming out. Really interesting. So that film seems to be focusing on one of the other investigators, other than Harry Price, who was Nandor Fodor, who was originally born in Hungary, but I believe possessed British and American citizenship. Another pretty interesting man, a parapsychologist, so someone interested again in the sort of the paranormal, in spiritual matters, on the occult, and all sorts of other strange, unexplainable phenomena, poltergeists. So I think he was actually more primarily interested in the kind of psychology behind it, rather than the actual entities themselves. And also the psychology behind the families and the people experiencing these hauntings. So he stayed with the Irving family for a week and actually came to the conclusion that none of them were lying about anything. But he credits GEF as a quote, split off, end quote, part of Jim Irving's personality. Whereas a lot of other people have looked to Vory, the daughter. So I just thought it was quite interesting that he explains it away as it being Jim kind of believing this and doing this as a sort of split off part of his psyche, if you will, not quite in conjunction with the rest of his reality. Whereas a lot of other naysayers and kind of media and a lot of other people that stayed with him and tried to investigate, try to get a glimpse of GEF, actually pointed the finger more at Vory, and kind of there's a lot of, in the British tabloid press, there was a lot of talk about Vory and her ventriloquist kind of skills. So that was a big theory amongst people, was that Vory had ventriloquist skills and she was throwing her voice around. So she could be standing in front of you looking like she's not talking and you'd be hearing GEF's voice, but that was because of her ventriloquism abilities. So yeah, I found it pretty interesting that Nandor Fodor had this other explanation as well. Unfortunately, things ended quite sadly for the Irving family. Vory and Margaret left the farmhouse in Cashin's Gap in 1945 after the death of Jim. They moved elsewhere, and the guy that moved in after shot a mongoose and claimed he had shot GEF. I really don't know what he got out of that, but according to the physical descriptions given by Vory, it was not GEF. It couldn't have been GEF. It was, physically very different. So I don't know if he just bought a mongoose so he could kill it. And what a very strange individual. I actually find, let's have a look at his name again. I've completely forgotten his name. I've done all the reading of it and it's escaped me because obviously vile person, so I don't want to remember him. Leslie Graham. Anyway, sorry for any family members. He probably wasn't a vile person. I'm a vegetarian. I get preachy about animals. Leave me alone. I just don't like the idea that he might have possibly just bought the house for the sake of being in GEF the Talking Mongoose's house and then killing Jeff the Talking Mongoose so he could go to the press and say, I've killed Jeff the Talking Mongoose. Like, I don't really understand the psychology behind it, why you would do that, especially as the family actually, they lost money on the sale of the house because, you know, shock horror, the story of a talking mongoose haunting your home doesn't exactly but bode well for resale value. But Jeff is a ghost, so he didn't kill Jeff. He just killed another poor mongoose, which, again, not very nice. Don't do that. The particularly interesting thing about the whole Jeff the Mongoose saga is that the family never wavered in their belief and in their claims that Jeff the Talking Mongoose was very much real to them. In fact, Vori died in 2005. You know, more than 70 years later, she held on to her claims and the belief in Jeff the Talking Mongoose. She never wavered in it. So that's it, really. That's the story of Jeff the Talking Mongoose. What do you believe? Personally, I find it a little bit strange that the family would kind of come together to create a big hoax, especially as it had such a negative impact on the resale value of their home and, you know, lots of other negative associations of people, of, like, you know, locals thinking that they're nutters and all that sort of stuff. So, but you know, call me crazy, I find it very difficult to believe in the idea of a talking mongoose ghost. But I could be very wrong. This is a very vast and strange world, and with many strange phenomena that we can't explain. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. What do you think about Jeff the Talking Mongoose? Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. It's been a good fun one for me to record. I want to say a big thank you again to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to just a little note that all of these podcasts that I do, I put out for free. I really appreciate people being on Patreon, but you do not need to be there. It does help me. The money will go towards the podcast. I'll make sure of that. But I do record these episodes by myself. I don't have a team. It's just me alongside full-time work and now, unfortunately, some health issues. So sometimes the episodes, you know, the quality is probably going to be all over the place. This show has always been chaotic. I would just ask that please keep that in mind. I do welcome emails and messages from people if if you've enjoyed an episode or if you haven't enjoyed an episode, but please don't be cruel. I have received, you know, a bit of a message that I think towed the line between constructive and being a bit cruel recently. So please don't be cruel. I'm really very much trying my best. As I've uploaded this episode a little bit late, a day late, almost 2 days, because I'm cutting it fine here. It's almost midnight, but I'm going to get it done. I'm going to get it uploaded in time. We live for the thrill of the anxiety of meeting deadlines right at the last minute. I handed in my master's dissertation literally with 1 minute to spare. That is not admirable. That is probably just very much undiagnosed ADHD. Anyway, where was I going? Anyway, the next episode will be on the 31st of August. I will definitely make sure of that because you'll see why. But that is going back to my home nation of Cornwall, and I'm hoping to do something a little bit different with it. I'm hoping to potentially bring on a guest, and maybe this next cycle of episodes, you know, I'm not saying that they all will involve guests, but maybe I can start to introduce guests to the show. Let me know how you feel about that. You might hate it, you know, you might think, Sian, do not do this, please. So let me know what you think. It's going to be my friend, if she'll allow it. if she'll allow to be on the podcast. I think that she will. It's going to be one of my best mates. So it's going to be really exciting talking to her about stuff and getting her kind of back and forth. We've got a lovely back and forth between us. Well, I think so anyway, because she's one of my best mates. And she has a lot of knowledge on Cornish foods because we're back on Cornwall, and yeah, we're going to be talking about food and drink and feast days and that kind of thing. So it's going to be a really great episode. I'm really, really looking forward to it, and I really hope that you enjoy it. So that will be coming out on the 31st of August. I will see you then. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for engaging. And despite what I've just said, do you know what? If you aren't happy with the podcast, just email me, message me anyway. I will accept any, you know, to even engage with it enough to send me an email, even if it's an unhappy one, is still an honour. And I must thank you all for taking the time to do that and listen to my show. And yeah, hope you continue to enjoy it, and see you next. Well, I won't see you. Listen to oh gosh, that's very creepy, isn't it? Goodbye. I am your host, Sian Esther Powell, and that has been another episode of the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. If you would like to find it elsewhere on the interwebs, you can also find me on Twitter at Celtic Myths Pod, on Facebook under Celtic Myths and Legends Podcast, on Patreon at Celtic Myths Pod, as well as Instagram at Celtic_Sian, and also CelticSian.co.uk. Thank you, Muraz, Diolch, Tachpalet, Guramahagat, Trugare, Guramayed. Thank you, and speak to you next time. Thank you.